All right, welcome back. We're going to be sprinting through the book of Ezra. So I learned more about Ezra recently than I think I ever knew. But Ezra, in chapter 7, verses 1 through 6, says, Now after this, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Ezra, the son of Sariah, son of Azariah, son of, so on and so forth. It lists a lot of, he's the son of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the chief priest. This Ezra went up from Babylonia. He was a scribe, skilled in the law of Moses that the Lord, the God of Israel, had given, and the king granted to him all that he asked, for the hand of the Lord his God was on him. So quick facts about Ezra as we begin. He was a Levitical priest, being from the line of Aaron. So he was the son of this guy, the son of this guy, the son of this guy, all the way back to Aaron, who was the brother of Moses. So Aaron was the chief priest that God set up there in the wilderness, and then his line specifically. So there was a whole tribe of Levi, but Aaron's line specifically, they were going to be the line of the high priest, the priestly line right there. And so he was a scribe, which basically just meant that he's someone who recorded, he documented, he copied, preserved, instructed others in the law of God. He lived in the 5th century before Christ. He led a second group of exiles, not the first group, but he led the second group of exiles back home in 458 BC. He most likely is the one who documented the Chronicles. So if you look at the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles, most likely Ezra wrote that. Ezra documented that. Authored the book of Ezra, that's obvious, and compiled together the events and experiences of Nehemiah. So there are some things in Nehemiah that are personal experience Ezra would not have had firsthand knowledge of, but it's more than likely that what Ezra did is he collected Nehemiah's stuff and compiled it together as like an editor of a book, but he put it together for Nehemiah. And so Ezra's name means Yahweh is my help, and this is going to become very pertinent for his book, Yahweh is my help. This is seen in chapter 7, verse 6. The king Artaxerxes granted him all that he asked. So we could probably just stop there and again go back to like God is my help, because what king is going to do this? And yet God is the one who stirs the heart of a king. He guides it in the right direction. The Lord made all of this happen, and so the king granted him all that he asked, for the hand of the Lord his God was on him. Chapter 7, verses 11 through 26 says, This is a copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes gave to Ezra. King gave to Ezra a letter. Ezra then delivered this. This is what it said. I make a decree that any one of the people of Israel in my kingdom who freely offers to go to Jerusalem may go with you, and also carry the silver and the gold that the king and his counselors have freely offered to the God of Israel, and whatever else is required for the house of your God, you may provide it out of the king's treasury. So not only am I allowing you, as the king of Persia at this time, not only am I allowing you to go back to your homeland, to the land of Jerusalem, and kind of rebuild the city, I am going to pay for your expenses. So, I mean, what king, especially a pagan king, is going to do something like that? Well, any king where the Lord is involved in, ultimately, God's the one making the decision. So again, Yahweh is my help. So some important dates to keep in mind. Cyrus issued the decree for the Jews to go home. The first wave of the Jewish exiles came back home in 538 BC. Cyrus, this was the first year of his reign. He conquered Babylon in 539 BC toward the end of the year. And then in 538 BC, issued the decree, all Jews can go home if they want to. And so he issued the decree, the first wave of Jewish exiles returned. And what we see is that there were 3 deportations of Babylon. Babylon came in 3 times and took people away 3 times. In the same way, there were 3 waves of people that came back from exile back to the land. There's one in 538 BC, one in Ezra's time, and then one in Nehemiah. Due to political pressure, the temple work stalled in about 536 BC. Haggai and Zechariah began their ministries in 520 BC. Temple construction was completed in 515 BC. Ezra led the second group of exiles to Israel in 458 BC, so he comes way later. Nehemiah led the third group of exiles to Israel in 445 BC. Ezra probably wrote his book around 430, give or take a few years. But as you can see, Ezra came much later than Haggai and Zechariah. So why are we talking about him? Where does he come into play? Well, the reason is because Ezra sets the stage, is because chapters 1 through 6 it documents Israel's history from Cyrus's decree in 538 BC to the completion of Zerubbabel's temple in 515 BC. So the first 6 chapters, apart from one of the chapters, the first 6 chapters are his documentation. This is everything that's happened before I even got here, before the second wave even returned to Israel, before any of this happened. I'm just telling you the history, the background, and then starting in chapters 7 through 10, that more details Ezra's actual ministry from Artaxerxes' decree in 458 BC when he returned with the second group of exiles to teach them Torah, or to teach them God's word. So Ezra perfectly is placed right after the book of Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 36, this is how it ends. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Judah. Whoever is all his people, may the Lord his God be with him. Let him go up. Now, this is one of those things that you read and you're like, who could have imagined that a political leader of his magnitude, the king of the known world at the time, would say something, not only just allow something like that, but even say something like that? And it's kind of like similar, not necessarily the same, but very similar to what we're seeing today, even with our current presidential administration, who are preaching Christ and posting on their like social media accounts like different things about praise the Lord and we're going to walk with him, different things like that. It's like, who would have imagined this a year ago, that our presidential administration of the United States would be saying certain things like this? Well, now we get to this point. Israel's been in exile, and now the time is officially, God's timing has come for them to return to the land. And he has raised up Cyrus, this pagan king, who doesn't necessarily believe in him. He believes in other gods, but he's raised him up to now send his people back to the land. And this is perfectly placed after Chronicles because it says the exact same thing, word for word. The only differences are in red there. And so instead, in Ezra 1 through 3, instead of starting with now, it just starts with in, and then it excludes the Lord and the word and here. Other than that, it is the exact same paragraph that we see in 2 Chronicles 36. Jeremiah 29, 10 through 14 says, for thus says the Lord, when 70 years are completed, that was your length of captivity, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will visit you, and I will fulfill to you my promise and bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you. Oh, there's that verse. Declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. We like to sew that on pillows and put that on posters and share it on memes and different things. And the application is true. God does know the plans he has for you and me, and he's got good plans for us as his people. But the context of this specific verse, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. That verse specifically is referring to they've been in captivity. God's bringing them back. I'm not giving up on you. I'm not abandoning you as my people. And so then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the peoples where I have driven you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you into exile. Isaiah 44:28 says, the Lord, who says of Cyrus, he named him by name before this even happened, he is my shepherd, and he shall fulfill all my purpose, saying of Jerusalem, she shall be built, and of the temple your foundation shall be laid. So Jeremiah, his prophecy took place 60 years prior, over 60 years prior. Isaiah prophesied over 160 years prior. On October 12th, 539 BC, The city of Babylon was overthrown. The Persian Empire rose to power. And in the first year of Cyrus's reign, 538 BC, he issued a written decree for Jewish exiles to go home. We don't know for certain, but it's possible that Daniel actually showed Cyrus Isaiah's prophecy. And Cyrus then is like, oh, hey, that's my name. God has raised me up to this task. It's possible. We don't know that for a fact, but either way, the Lord used Cyrus to send his people back in 538 BC. Now, it must be noted they did not have to go. No one was going to pick them up and kick them out. No one was going to force them to go back. They had a choice to make at this point, to leave the life they've built for the past 70 years and return to Judah, or to stay. After all, leaving would be very difficult. Leaving would involve selling their belongings and packing up all their things, getting the family together and moving hundreds of miles away. For many, it would be leaving their home and knowing they will never return. So you're leaving this place. You've grown up here. You've made memories here. This really is your home. And I'm calling you to leave and go back to a land you've never been to, and they will never return. Setting aside what was comfortable and intentionally heading into the unknown, starting over. And then staying might mean there's no extra work on their part, and they keep what they have. So, it's not going to cost us anything to just stay here. Keeping the family together in the place we've come to know. Not having to sell your business or house or leave your life. Maintaining your comfortable life opposed to heading out into a wilderness to ultimately live in a dilapidated city. Not having to start over. So there were pros and cons the people kind of were faced with and met. Whether or not they would stay behind in the place of exile, that would certainly be a lot easier for them. Or if they would take a step of faith and they would return back with their countrymen to their homeland. This is kind of the picture from the Bible Project of all of these exiles, about 50,000 of them heading back in this first wave from Babylon to Jerusalem. It says in Ezra 1, 5 through 11, then rose up everyone whose spirit God had stirred to go up and rebuild the house of the Lord. Cyrus the king also brought out the vessels of the house of the Lord that Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and placed in the house of his gods. Ezra 2, 1 through 70 numbers the returning people. That's where we get the number. Don't worry, we're not going to read all of these. But it says this, now these were the people of the province who came up out of the captivity of those exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried captive to Babylonia. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own town. They came with Zerubbabel. It lists the number of men, priests, Levites, temple servants, even people are listed in this list whose genealogical information could not actually be verified. And so for obvious reasons then, they were excluded from any of the priesthood obligations or requirements because they were unclean. And maybe you can't verify who you are or which tribe you're from. Like, how are we supposed to know? So some of those documents were lost. So it did include some of those people. Chapter 2, verses 64 through 65 says the whole assembly together was 42,360, besides their male and female servants, of whom there were 7,337, and they had 200 male and female singers. So I don't know the exact number, but that's about 50,000 people. Summary of the first two chapters of Ezra. So again, we're sprinting through this book. Summary of the first two chapters. King Cyrus issued a decree that Jewish exiles could return to Jerusalem. You have been in captivity for 70 years now. I have conquered Babylon. I'm the big bad boss in town, and I'm allowing you to go back home. So anyone who wants to, feel free. Be my guest. This was to fulfill several prophecies made many years prior. They were allowed to go back to their homeland and rebuild their temple. The people then took up a free will offering for the journey and for the temple. The Persian government returned all the sacred vessels from the temple, which Nebuchadnezzar had confiscated decades prior. So anything that, when Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon came in, destroyed the temple, they took everything out and they dragged it off to Babylon. They put it in their temples with their gods. Well, they're giving it all back to the people. Now take this back to the land of Jerusalem. Give it back to your God. Give it back to your temple. The exiles who chose to return in this first wave were numbered and added up to about 50,000 people. And when they arrived, they first occupied the towns around Jerusalem. And beginning in Ezra 3, this is when we see they actually get to work. So chapter 3, verse 1 says, when the 7th month came and the children of Israel were in the towns, the people gathered as one man to Jerusalem. So this 7th month, this is the month of Tishri, September, October timeframe. So right now, we're living in Tishri. And this is a very sacred month for the calendar. Obviously worked a little bit differently than ours. So 7th month for them, for us it's the 9th month. But 7th month for them, it was the month of Tishri, September, October timeframe. And in this month, it was in one sense, kind of the start of we have 3 very big festivals, 3 very big Jewish feasts and times of celebration. And it kind of inaugurates in one sense a new year. It's not necessarily the new year calendar-wise, but it is a new year for the people to get back to the Lord their God. And so Rosh Hashanah, which Israel celebrated just the other day in our time, is the Feast of Trumpets, celebrated on the first day of this month. Yom Kippur, then 10 days later, is the Day of Atonement. That's the day when the high priest goes behind the curtain in the temple. No one else in all of Israel is allowed behind that curtain, but he goes behind that curtain and he offers a sacrifice on behalf of the whole nation. And so then the whole nation is cleansed of their sin. And then Sukkoth, or the Feast of Booths, or the Feast of Tabernacles, has a couple different names, celebrated on the 15th through the 22nd. So this is a very big celebratory month for the nation of Israel. And it says in verse 2, they built the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings on it, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Verses 3 and 4, they set the altar in its place, for fear was on them because of the peoples of the lands, and they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord, burnt offerings morning and evening, and they kept the Feast of Booths. From the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, but the foundation of the temple of the Lord was not yet laid. So the first thing that they built for the Lord was the altar. As soon as they came into the land, they kind of got situated into their own dwellings first. That makes sense. They need their own houses. Otherwise, they're just going to be laying in hammocks and sleeping outside. So they got kind of their dwelling places set up around the city of Jerusalem first. And then they came together to Jerusalem and they built the altar. They did this so that they could offer sacrifices, burnt offerings, and free will offerings. Then they set their sights on the temple's foundation after that. And so they gave money to the masons and the carpenters, and food, drink, and oil to the Sidonians and the Tyrians, to bring cedar trees from Lebanon to the sea to Joppa, according to the grant that they had from Cyrus. Ezra 3:8 says, now in the 2nd year after their coming to the house of God at Jerusalem, in the 2nd month, Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jehozadak, appointed the Levites from 20 years old and upward to supervise the work of the house of the Lord. Now, when it says the 2nd year, 2nd month, this is April, May of 536 BC. The timeline of events here is October of 539 BC, King Cyrus of Persia conquers Babylon. And in 538 BC, the king allows Jews to go back home. So 539 BC is when Babylon is destroyed. They're conquered. 538 BC is his first year as king. He issues the decree. 537 BC, Jews return to Israel and build the altar. 536 BC, Israel's builders lay the temple foundation. And when the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, it says the priests in their vestments came forward with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals to praise the Lord according to the directions of David, the king of Israel. So everyone, they lay the foundation of the temple. Everyone's very excited. It's a time of celebration for the people of Israel. And it says they sing responsively, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His steadfast love endures forever toward Israel. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. But many of the priests and Levites and heads of fathers' houses, old men who had seen the first house, they had actually lived long enough to see the first temple before it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, before it was destroyed by Babylon. So they saw the first one, then they saw the pile of rubble, and then now they're seeing this new foundation being laid, and it says they wept with a loud voice when they saw the foundation of this house being laid. And that makes a lot of sense if we think about it just in our terms, because it's like anything. It's like, oh man, things will just never be the way that they were when I was growing up. So it kind of it makes us sad in one sense because of how things used to be. That's how they were feeling. I remember the temple when it was Solomon's temple. It was glorious. It was beautiful. And now we've laid this foundation. The temple's not even built yet. We just have the foundation. And I can already tell it's not going to be near as glorious, near as beautiful, near as majestic as it once was. And so they begin to weep and cry. But many shouted aloud for joy, so that the people could not distinguish the sound of the joyful shout from the sound of the people weeping. For the people shouted with a great shout, and the sound was heard far away. So most of the people, though, did not live to see that. They were very excited. For them, this was an awesome time. Hey, we laid the foundation of the temple. God is good. God is working. Let's keep going. As of this point in the account, Israel was experiencing win after win after win. I mean, we made it through the first 3 chapters, and it's just like they're untouchable, they're unstoppable. 3 chapters of success. So as can be expected, an adversary is about to come on the scene, because whenever God is so clearly working, the enemy is not far behind. We see that in the Old Testament, we see that in the New Testament, we see that in our lives. Ezra 4 tells us about this adversary. Now, when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple to the Lord, the God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of fathers' houses and said to them, "Let us build with you, for we worship your God." Notice they didn't say, like, it's not personal, it's just we worship your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him ever since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here. So ever since the Assyrians invaded the northern kingdom of Israel, conquered the land, led away many of them captive, brought all these foreigners in, there were still some Israelites there, so they intermarried, and now they have this diluted culture, this other race of different people group, basically. And so they're saying to them, we've been worshiping him ever since that took place. But Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the rest of the heads of fathers' houses in Israel said to them, "You have nothing to do with us in building a house to our God, but we alone will build to the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us." So they don't want them involved because they're not really the same. They're not worshiping the same God. They're not really on the same field in terms of faith. But then he's also using the political reason. King Cyrus ordered us to build this, so we're going to follow his decree. So they're kind of going back to the political side of it. This might sound harsh at first, but these people weren't really genuine believers. They were what we would know them by as the Samaritans. After Assyria conquered and resettled the northern kingdom of Israel, these people had intermarried with foreigners, which diluted and altered their faith, and they had a religion of syncretism, which meant that they just added God and his ways into all of their pagan religious practices. So to put this in, to give a very easy example of this in our society today, if you wanted to put this in perspective, it would kind of be like, we have some Mormons, some transgender pastors, a Jewish rabbi, and some Jehovah's Witnesses, and we're going to start a church together. So that doesn't work. I don't know. I think we'd all be on the same page. That's not going to work. So that's kind of what's going on here. We have all of these people who say we worship the God of the Bible. All of them would say that, and yet it's very clearly not the case. You have Christians who are worshiping the God of the Bible, the God of the universe, but then you have all of these cults, and then Jewish people, they don't even worship Jesus. So we obviously have a problem with that. But then you have all these cults, and then you have all these other groups that so clearly are not Christians. They're not in the faith. And so this would be like starting a church together. It's not going to work. So that's why Zerubbabel and Jeshua said no, because they have a very syncretistic religion here, the Samaritans did. They had maybe they offered sacrifices to the God of the Bible, but they just added him onto all of their other gods that they had. So gods from Assyria, gods from Babylon, gods from all of the pagan nations that they were inundated with. And so speaking of these people, 2 Kings 17 says, "But every nation, they still made gods of its own and put them in the shrines of the high places that the Samaritans had made. So they feared the Lord, but they also served their own gods." So I love, it says they feared the Lord in the sense that, they worshiped God, but they also served their own gods. And then he goes on to say in the same passage, just so we're clear though, that doesn't actually mean that they're fearing God. They're not actually worshiping him. They do not fear the Lord. So these nations feared the Lord. They're worshiping him, they're offering sacrifices, but they really don't fear him. And also serve their carved images. Their children did likewise, their children's children, as their fathers did, so they do to this day. So that's kind of the background for that. Jewish leaders made it very clear that they were not aiming to win any popularity contests or political brownie points. Their main goal here was to maintain the purity of the people. They wanted to safeguard the people. And so because Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the other leading men would not allow them to take part, they got mad and they did everything they could to stop and stall the work. So when getting the people to compromise didn't work, which is usually Satan's first tactic, I want to get the people to compromise their faith, just give in a little, but they wouldn't do it. They would not give in. Nope. We let us finish the temple, you can come worship after that, but we're not going to build this temple together. Compromising didn't work, so the enemy then tried a new tactic. They then sought to discourage the people and make them afraid to keep working. They used slander. They made threats. They accused falsely. They bribed judges. They used politics. They stirred up the peoples. Ezra 4:4-6 says, "Then the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build and bribed counselors against them to frustrate their purpose." If you pay any attention to social media these days, we've got a whole lot of bribed judges all over our country. So it's not hard to imagine and kind of envision the scene that they're bribing these people, these counselors, these judges who have at least a small amount of political sway. And so they're doing this to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia, and in the reign of Ahasuerus, which is Esther's husband. So if you read the book of Esther, Ahasuerus is Esther's husband, the king. In the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. And so these people, the point is, they're doing everything they could to stir up trouble. They're doing everything they could to stop the work, which actually then, it serves the point we just made. It serves to prove to us they were not genuine in their initial request, because if they were genuine, they would desire to see the temple of God proceed, not be prevented. But because they're not really genuine in this, they're trying everything they can to stop it. So their actions reveal their true motives. We have a list of the kings here. I just wanted to provide this. So we have Cyrus, who issued the decree. He lived from 559 to 530 BC. His son Cambyses then ruled after him for a few short years. Bardia and Darius ultimately came on the throne 522 to 586 BC. He's the one who really gained, he was one of the generals actually, he's not from the royal line, but his was basically a new dynasty, and he was a very capable, very masterful leader. Xerxes the first, which is Ahasuerus, that's Esther's husband, and Artaxerxes after him. And so what is revealed is just the ongoing animosity toward the Jewish people. And that's where he starts to get into this. That's what this next section is designed to portray. If you're reading from the book of Ezra, I found it at first, I was like, I don't understand the timing of what's going on. But what he is doing is he's just showing that the enemy is cunning and constant. So remember, Ezra lived in the early mid-5th century before Christ. He was responsible for leading the second wave of Jewish exiles back to Israel in 458 BC. So that's his date. That's when Ezra comes on the scene. What we're talking about for Haggai is much earlier than that, but Ezra comes on in 458 BC. So this next section, chapter 4, verses 6 through 23, is simply showcasing the theme of persistent opposition that spanned nearly 100 years. It's just constant. The enemy will not leave them alone. They are relentless. Therefore, just take note of the fact that Ezra 4, 6 through 23 is a more of a parenthetical note. So verses 6 through 23, in one sense, is as if there was parentheses around that section. Ezra is including that to show that the enemy's opposition is just constant against the people. And so this took place between 458, Ezra's arrival, and 445, which was Nehemiah's arrival. Ezra 4, 6 through 23, this is where the parenthetical note begins. In the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. And then in the days of Artaxerxes, who came after him, Bishlam and Mithridath and Tabeel and the rest of their associates wrote to Artaxerxes, king of Persia. The letter was written in Aramaic and translated. Rahum, the commander, and Shimshai, the scribe, wrote a letter against Jerusalem to Artaxerxes, the king, as follows. Rahum, the commander, Shimshai, the scribe, and the rest of their associates, the judges, the governors, the officials, the Persians, the men of Erech, the Babylonians, the men of Susa, that is, the Elamites, and the rest of the nations whom the great and noble Osnapper deported and settled in the cities of Samaria and in the rest of the province beyond the river. This is the copy of the letter that they sent. That is quite the introduction, but that's how they introduced this letter. All right, to Artaxerxes the king. This is our letter. To Artaxerxes the king. Your servants. You always start that way if you want to get like brownie points, get what you want. So we're going to butter you up. We're going to flatter you. You're the king. We're your servants. We just really care about your throne and your kingdom. The men of the province beyond the river being the Jordan River. So everything on the other side of the Jordan River, I don't have a map with me, but everything on the other side of the Jordan River, that's the land of Israel. That's where the people have come back to. So your servants, the men of the province beyond the river, send greeting. And now, we just want to make you aware, be it known to the king that the Jews who came up from you to us have gone to Jerusalem. They are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They are finishing the walls and repairing the foundations. Now be it known to the king that if this city is rebuilt and the walls finished, they will not pay tribute, custom, or toll, and the royal revenue will be impaired. If you ever want to catch the government's attention, just don't pay your taxes, or just tell people not to pay their taxes. That's exactly what they're doing. They're using any political means as possible. Now, because we eat the salt of the palace, and it is not fitting for us to witness the king's dishonor, therefore we send and inform the king. We're just trying to help you, king. Like we don't want to stir up any trouble. We're just letting you know, listen, it's a rebellious city. If they rebuild this, they're not going to pay tribute. They're going to rebel against you just like before. We hate to break it to you. In order that search be made in the book of the records of your fathers, you will find in the book of the records and learn that this city is a rebellious city, hurtful to kings and provinces, and that sedition was stirred up in it from old. That was why this city was laid waste. Verse 16, we make known to the king that if this city is rebuilt and its walls finished, you will then have no possession in the province beyond the river. So they're trying to use, to the king, they're trying to use fear in one sense. No king wants to be, no leader wants to be responsible for, the whole thing fell apart under your rule and under your reign. That's exactly what they're pointing fingers at. You're going to be responsible for this if you let this happen. So the king sent an answer. And it says, to Rahum the commander and Shimshai the scribe and the rest of the associates who live in Samaria and the rest of the province beyond the river, greeting. And now the letter that you sent to us has been plainly read before me. And I made a decree, and search has been made, and it has been found that this city from of old has risen against kings, and that rebellion and sedition have been made in it. So there's a testimony for you that Israel's testimony is they are rebellious. They are wicked before the Lord and before these people. That's how the world sees them and knows them. So that's actually a very sad testimony for them, but it is true. We can point to many examples. And mighty kings have been over Jerusalem, who ruled over the whole province beyond the river, to whom tribute, custom, and toll were paid. So at one point in history, people like David and especially Solomon ruled over all of this land. And the nations surrounding them, they paid tribute to Israel, but then obviously because of their sin, they were judged, and now they're paying tribute to us. Verse 21, therefore make a decree that these men be made to cease, and that this city not be rebuilt. So the king is saying stop, cease and desist, until, key word, a decree is made by me. Until a decree is made by me. And take care not to be slack in this matter. Why should damage grow to the hurt of the king? Then, when the copy of King Artaxerxes' letter was read before Rahum and Shimshai the scribe and their associates, they went in haste to the Jews at Jerusalem, and by force and power made them cease. Ezra's point in bringing all this up, because this happened a long time after the temple was made already at this point. So this is a much later date. But Ezra's point in putting this in this section is that there are nonstop attacks from the enemy. So Artaxerxes was during the time of Ezra. He sent Ezra and the people, that second wave. After they came to the land of Jerusalem, they're rebuilding the city. The people in the area don't like what's going on, so they send this message to the king. King sends back, cease and desist. But then comes, a few years later, Nehemiah, and the king loves Nehemiah. Nehemiah is the king's cupbearer, and the king notices Nehemiah is just not, he's sad. He's having a bad day. And so he asks Nehemiah, what's wrong? And Nehemiah is fearing for his life because you weren't supposed to show emotion to the king. Otherwise, you could actually lose your life at that time. But God was with Nehemiah, and Nehemiah asked if he could go to Jerusalem and build the wall. And Artaxerxes, who said everything should stop until a decree is made by me, then made a decree that Nehemiah could go and build the wall. So it all works out. But he's just pointing out here that the enemy just continues to attack. The work on the temple was speeding ahead, slowing down, stopping altogether. This gets us back into the time period that we're in. And so in Ezra 4:24, then the work of the house of God that is in Jerusalem stopped, and it ceased until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. After a 16-year delay, so 536 BC, now 520 BC, laying the foundation, in 536, picking up where it left off in 520, God sent the people two prophets, Haggai and Zechariah. Ezra 5:1, now the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, the son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of God of Israel, who was over them. Then Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, arose and began to rebuild the house of God that is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. At the same time, Tatnai, governor of the province beyond the river, and Shethar-Bozenai and their associates came to them and spoke to them thus, who gave you a decree to build this house and to finish this structure? They also asked them this, what are the names of the men who are building this building? But the eye of their God was on the elders of the Jews, and they did not stop them until the report should reach Darius, and then answer be returned by letter concerning it. Verse 6, this is a copy of the letter that Tatnai, the governor of the province beyond the river, and Shethar-Bozenai and his associates, the governors who were in the province beyond the river, sent to Darius the king. They sent him a report in which was written as follows. To Darius the king, all peace. Be it known to the king that we went to the province of Judah, to the house of the great God. It is being built with huge stones, and timber is laid in the walls. This work goes on diligently and prospers in their hands. Then we asked those elders and spoke to them thus, who gave you a decree to build this house and to finish this structure? We also asked them for their names, for your information, that we might write down the names of their leaders, and this was their reply to us. So they see that the work on the temple, the foundation was laid many years ago. Now they're coming back. They're actually starting to build it. And so they're wondering, well, why are you building this now? Who gave you the decree? Who told you to do this? And so they send word back to the king. It says, we are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and we are rebuilding the house that was built many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and finished. But because our fathers had angered the God of heaven, he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this house and carried away the people of Babylonia. However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, Cyrus the king made a decree that this house of God should be rebuilt. So good for them. They're actually using politics in their favor. So they're going back to his decree. And the gold and silver vessels of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple that was in Jerusalem, brought into the temple of Babylon, these Cyrus took out of the temple of Babylon, and they were delivered to one whose name was Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor. And he said to him, take these vessels, go and put them in the temple that is in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be rebuilt on its site. Then this Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundations of the house of God that is in Jerusalem, and from that time until now it has been in building, and it is not yet finished. Therefore, if it seems good to the king, let search be made in the royal archives there in Babylon to see whether a decree was issued by Cyrus the king for the rebuilding of this house of God in Jerusalem, and let the king send us his pleasure in this matter. Let's just say they were about to regret ever writing that letter. Ezra 6, 1 through 12. Then Darius, the king, Darius at this point is very new to the throne. So the former king had just died. There were revolts. Obviously, when a king dies, like who's going to take control? People are going to want their independence, and other people are going to want to take the throne. So Darius was the military general who ultimately squelched all the rebellions, put it all to silence. He took the throne, and his very capable leader, he pretty much put all of the empire under his leadership, under his authority. He was very good at what he did. And this happened just shortly after that. And so then Darius the king made a decree, and search was made in Babylonia in the house of the archives where the documents were stored. And in Ecbatana, the citadel that is in the province of Media, a scroll was found on which this was written, a record in the first year of Cyrus the king. I can't help but think of Gandalf whenever he's reading the ancient records of the ring. He's just reading in the ancient times in the third age. You know, like this is kind of what they're reading. A record in the first year of Cyrus the king. Cyrus the king issued a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the house be rebuilt, the palace, the place where sacrifices were offered, and let its foundations be retained. Its height shall be 60 cubits, and its breadth 60 cubits, with 3 layers of great stones and 1 layer of timber. Let the cost be paid from the royal treasury. So I don't just want them to build it. I want to pay for it. And also let the gold and the silver of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that is in Jerusalem and brought back to Babylon, be restored and brought back to the temple that is in Jerusalem, each to its place. You shall put them in the house of God. Now therefore, Tattenai, governor of the province beyond the river, Shethar-Bozenai and your associates, the governors who are in the province beyond the river, keep away, because I know exactly what you're doing. I know exactly what you're trying to stir up. Stay away from them. The decree was made by Cyrus the king to build the house. So leave them alone. Let them build it. He also says, let the work on this house of God alone. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews rebuild this house of God on its site. Moreover, and this is the part that they wish they never would have seen, or wish they never would have written the letter in the first place. Moreover, I make a decree regarding what you shall do. No one likes it whenever someone starts like that. This is what I command you. Because remember, Darius is the king, and if these people don't follow him, he's going to have them killed. So this is what you shall do for these elders of the Jews for the rebuilding of this house of God. The cost is to be paid to these men in full and without delay from the royal revenue. The tribute of the province from beyond the river. So all of your tax dollars, a portion of that is going to go pay for the Jerusalem temple. That's kind of what he's saying there. and whatever is needed, bulls, rams, or sheep for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, or oil, as the priests at Jerusalem require, let that be given to them day by day without fail, that they may offer pleasing sacrifices to the God of heaven and pray for the life of the king and his sons. I'm not going to go without sending that in. I want them to pray for me. I'm the king, and I just started. So he is making them pay for it. They sent this letter. At first, it was just, we don't like you, Jewish people, and we don't like that you're building this. So we're going to try to send this letter so that he'll stop you doing it. But now the king actually discovers that they're supposed to be paying for it, so he makes them pay for it. And they have to keep supplying them for all of the things that they need, the animals and the different ingredients, the wheat, salt, wine, oil. And so it's one of those prophecies that we see over and over again about God talking about, like, whenever all of this starts to unfold, God is actually going to have his people, they're going to be the ones plundering the other nations. This is exactly what's happening. Ezra 6, verse 11 says, "Also, I make a decree that if anyone alters this edict, if you don't abide by it, a beam shall be pulled out of his house, and he shall be impaled on it, and his house shall be made a dunghill." That's probably a bad word, but that's what he said. "May the God who has caused his name to dwell there overthrow any king or people who shall put out a hand to alter this or destroy this house of God that is in Jerusalem. I, Darius, make a decree. Let it be done with all diligence." Have I made myself clear? Yes, you have, because no one wants to be impaled by a stake from their own house. Ezra 6:13, "Then according to the word sent by Darius the king, Tatnai, the governor of the province beyond the river, Shethar, Bozenai, and their associates did with all diligence." I'm sure they did what Darius the king had ordered. Why? Because Ezra 5:5 ultimately goes back to this: the eye of their God was on the elders of the Jews. God is the one who made Cyrus issue the decree. God's the one bringing them back to the land. He made the promises, and he's fulfilling the promises. So ultimately, God's the one who makes all of this happen. And Proverbs 21:1 says, "The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will." He did this with Cyrus. He did this with Darius. And it says in verse 14, "The elders of the Jews built and prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. They finished their building by decree of the God of Israel and by decree of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king." God is the ultimate lawgiver. He's the ultimate decree maker. It even says they finished their building by decree of God of Israel. The rest, they just do according ultimately to what God decrees. So Cyrus, Darius, they're just ultimately following what the Lord has already decreed. Artaxerxes, all of these people. 538 BC is when Cyrus issued the decree for them to go back to the land. Darius in 520 BC issued the decree that said that you need to pay to make sure that this is finished as soon as possible. And Artaxerxes issued the decree in 446 BC that Nehemiah can go back and they can rebuild the whole city and they can finish out all of it. So the second temple was completed March 12th, 515 BC. So if you are a date keeper, March 12th, 515 BC was when the second temple was completed. And the people of Israel, the priests and the Levites and the rest of the returned exiles celebrated the dedication of this house of God with joy. They offered at the dedication of this house of God 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs. Should I mention that they were paid for by the surrounding nations? By the way, it doesn't say that, but we know that. As a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats according to the number of the tribes of Israel. And they set the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their divisions for the service of God at Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses. On the 14th day of the first month, the returned exiles kept Passover, for the priests and the Levites had purified themselves together. All of them were clean, So they slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the returned exiles, for their fellow priests, and for themselves. It was eaten by the people of Israel who had returned from exile, and also by everyone who had joined them and separated himself from the uncleanness of the peoples of the land to worship the Lord, the God of Israel. And they kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with joy, for the Lord had made them joyful and had turned the heart of the king of Assyria to them, so that he aided them in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. The point, when God decides to act, nothing can stop him. And when it says the king of Israel, or the king of Assyria, Assyria at this point they're not in charge anymore. Assyria really isn't even a nation anymore. Remember, Babylon came in, destroyed Nineveh, conquered Assyria. Now at this point, Persia's come in. Persia has conquered Babylon, not just the city, but the entire empire. Persia is the big bad boss in town. They're the world's superpower at this time. But this is one of those terms that is just referred to as the king of the exile. Earlier on in the book of Ezra, we see that Cyrus is referred to as the king of Babylon, but he's not the king of Babylon, he's the king of Persia. And so they're kind of the same thing that we see throughout this. When it's referring to the king of Assyria, it's referring to Darius at this point, even though, again, Assyria is not the ruling power at this time, but it's the king of the exile. That's who they're referring to, the king of the exile, the king of the world at this point. And so this is the history of the Second Temple. Israel was taken into captivity via 3 deportations, 605, 597, and 586 BC. Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the First Temple in 586 BC. King Cyrus of Persia conquered Babylon in 539 BC and issued a decree for Jews to return home in 538 BC. They first built the altar. They then laid the foundation, and they finished building the Second Temple in 515 BC. So you already know now what's going to happen in the book of Haggai, but this is the history that we read in the book of Ezra. So we're going to take a break for about 15 minutes or so, come back at 11:15, and then we will start in the book of Haggai, where Haggai and Zechariah are now preaching and prophesying to the people. Let's break.